What's up? What's up, everybody? Welcome aboard to Bubba's Bottom Line, our weekly edition that goes along with our Bubba's Daily Updates. And great to be here, and I'm glad you are here to see what's going on. And of course, if we look back at last week's markets, surprise, another up week. It's almost like I could say it every week, and we'd be right. The markets continue to fight higher on who knows what. I think the interesting facts of the declining volume, declining volatility are of a concern. But again, markets keep going higher. So who am I to say that they can't even go higher? And there is no way to say that they can't go higher. There's indications that there's things that could make them go higher. But I'm looking at this as a more of a buy the rumor, sell the news kind of deal. I think a lot of this movement higher has been based on a lot of things that Trump has done, a lot of the executive orders, the new executive order in healthcare, but also tax cuts and tax reform. And I think it's going to be a challenge to get those done. But as you continue to push markets higher on air, as you continue to build what we'll call the house of cards, you will see that the markets are going to reach a point at some point. And again, the number I couldn't even care to guess or hazard a guess at what to tell you what it's going to be. But at some point up here, the markets are going to find a reason that they no longer want to go higher, and then they'll sell off. But until then, you look at this, and I think that what we have here is a rally based on what's going to happen. The market's being forward-looking, price a lot of these things in early, but if we look back, we started earnings season last week. JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, and Citigroup. They all beat on earnings, but they all had the same complaint. And I think this is something that is worth noting. The complaint is that their trading revenues were down, which makes sense because the lack of market activity does tend to bring down the cost and the profits made from trading. But the bigger concern is what we've talked about here for, on the Bubba Show and here for years, and the amount of debt that's being piled up right now. Their concern is a lot of their profits came from credit card debt, which is probably less than 50-50 that it will get paid back. So the debt is an issue when you tie it in with everything else. If you take a look at the lack of jobs and the lack of good jobs, and of course, we talked last week about the jobs number, which was lost 33,000 jobs, but higher wages. But are the wages really higher, and was it really rightfully blamed on the hurricanes? And I would venture to say no. I would venture to say that we have a problem. This is the same concern that we've seen for a number of years. When the Obama administration, took out the coal industry, basically, and took out some of the other industries without warning, that reduced wages of many Americans. And of course, when you see that those Americans are now going back to work into part-time jobs, into minimum wage jobs, that does not help with the benefit package. The benefit package is, we can talk all we want about salaries and how much we're making. But it's not always about what you're making, it's about what you don't have to pay out. And of course, healthcare is a gigantic cost today. And if you have to pay out the healthcare, the companies didn't want to hire because of Obamacare, okay? And then people that didn't want to be in Obamacare, because again, if you talk about some of the things you get roped into, it's kind of like the cable TV, the menu where you get so many channels, but so what? So if I get 200 channels, but I watch 3, what do I need 200 for? The real issue here is that when you're giving a woman in her 60s or 70s maternity care that she's paying for, okay, it doesn't work out right. When you try to pool everybody in, and you want healthy people to pay for people that are not healthy, that doesn't work out well either. Now again, that goes back to how do you set the policies up? And of course, I think a lot of the information out there now, and I think we saw this with that new executive order of Trump, is that associations can now cross state lines to get insurance. Again, this won't take place right away, but that's the theory, because now you take the example that they actually used was Fast Signs, which has, I think, 600 locations, or maybe 600 locations, 6,000 employees. If they can pool together into one group and get health insurance, they're now a big group versus an individual, which makes it a difference when you're the insurance company, because if you go in and you're 25 or 30 and you're perfectly healthy, you shouldn't have to pay for somebody who's 65 and has some health issues. It's just, human beings, we're like cars. The older we get, the more likelihood there is breakdown. The more medication that we take. So that is something that needs to be worked out, and I think this is the start. Now, can we get there? I don't know. Again, there's so much battling going on in Washington. And, again, I don't blame either party. I think the left is much more aligned than the right, but the right is no bargain either. I think that they've done a tremendous amount of damage to our overall system. And I think the real problem is that they've gone too far left and too far right. What happened to the middle ground where there were a few issues? But again, that's issues that will hopefully resolve themselves. But we are really creating a tremendous amount of damage for our future. All right. Now, again, I'm old. I'm not so worried about my future, but I am worried about my kids and my grandchildren and things like that as part of a future. And that, I think, becomes the bigger problem. I think when you look at this whole thing, there's many things that are going to get in the way of prosperity, because until we make some hard changes, we're going to continue to have these problems. We're going to continue to have these problems with debt. Now, we've got earnings starting out again. This week you've got Goldman Sachs on Tuesday, you've got Netflix on Monday, and a bunch of others. But again, I think watch the common theme here and the common thread, which is most of these companies are getting great earnings on cutting back on their balance sheet, not on growing and doing some CapEx spending. So when you look at that picture, that does not bode well either. And the whole thing tied together is a very ugly picture, but we continue to ignore that. And I think that becomes even the bigger problem. We've got this whole model of complacency that the Fed will always bail us out. The markets will continue to go higher. And that's all well and good. But the biggest trick we're missing here is the velocity of money, because the money is basically going into the coffers of the extremely wealthy and not somehow making its way down, the trickle-down theory. If we do not get money to move, if we do not free up the ability for small business to make more money, or to make money, period, or to even want to start a new business, we are going to fall into a massive hole. And this is where the difference, where the financialization and the nationalization comes in. And this is, you can see it as clear as the nose on your face, that we are moving more into a socialism or socialist society because of what's being done here. I think that you look at what's being done by the Federal Reserve, and of course we're going to talk about them later, but their willingness to continue to pound money into the system, their willingness to continue to create dollars, to create debt, is going to create a much bigger problem down the road. We always think that the problems are going to go away, which is a big problem in the Keynesian way of thinking. Okay, and again, I'm not saying that there aren't some good factors. Again, this is a decision. Is Western or Austrian economics better than Keynesian? And I say there's probably a great blend somewhere in between there. But I think that the way things are being done now, with the overall currency wars, with all of the problems that are being created throughout all of nations, and with everybody having this, I don't know if we'll call it irrational exuberance, as Alan Greenspan once coined it, but it's a problem. It's a problem when we don't believe that anything can ever go wrong. It's a problem when we know that daddy, or in this case, mommy, Janet Yellen, will continue to push the printing press if we need more money. And I think these are major, major issues that cannot be resolved by a continued printing of money, by a continued free money. at some point, this debt will have to be settled. At some point, we're going to see a major problem, and I think that part of it will come out of China and some others. But we're going to talk about that stuff when we come back from the break. This is Bubba's Bottom Line, Todd Bubba Horwitz, and I want to share with something with all of you. I've now started to use Patreon to help finance my high school investing program. So if you check it out, go to Patreon. That's patreon.com/Bubba Trading. Check it out. See if you want to help out. We're now trying to continue to grow this high school program. And since I finance it by myself, check it out. In the meantime, we're going to step out here for a break, and we'll be back with more right after the break on Bubba's Bottom Line. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Bubba's Bottom Line. Great to be here and great to enjoy time with you. Too bad my Cubbies lost, but they got time. They still got a few more games to go, and maybe they'll turn around. They'll be back home. But I was kind of happy to see Kershaw pitched decent, not great, but he pitched good enough and didn't get the loss, so that was okay. I'm a fan. But so let's get back to this debacle that's being created in the monetary system. You know, we've got, first of all, you've got Mario Draghi and their ridiculous policy over there. So again, they're the same as the Fed here. It's ECB, terrible. In the meantime, you know, they're worried about inflation. They're worried about this problem. And of course, the inflation worries come because they're worried they're not going to get theirs. They need inflation to hike your asset prices so that you can pay more taxes, so they can finance this stupid debt that they continue to put out there, $4.5 trillion just by the Federal Reserve. It's ridiculous. And of course, Draghi continues to beat the drum that they're going to do whatever it takes, and they're worried about inflation. You know what's amazing is we've seen this movie over time, and it always ends up very poorly. And then, of course, it always ends up very poorly hurting the stock markets, because right now you're flooding assets into the markets. You know, Japan owns 55% of their market, of their stock market. You've got government intervention trying to prop markets up with money that they don't have, with money they have to create, hoping that they can create inflation, which inflation should not be brought on by a mandate. Inflation should be brought on by supply, demand, and by what's needed, and by success. And that's one of, I think, another issue that continues to bother me and brings me to a lot of struggles thinking about what they're doing, because the destruction that they're creating is way past it. And now we've got China. There's a good chance that China may go into some major devaluation of their currency. That will rock the world. If they do something with the yuan, that will rock your world, and that could be the event that does eventually cause the market meltdown. One of the problems when you get involved in these different currencies and you do not allow them to truly free float, they're supposed to be free floating, but again, they're free floating to a point until their central banks step in and do some of their nonsense, which is always the case. But if they devalue, it creates an effect across the globe. And of course, the yuan, which has been striving to be the new reserve currency, if they start to devalue, I don't know what that does to it. I think that one of the things you're seeing here, though, is the death or so of the petrodollar, which was created after we were no longer in the gold standard, and oil was then priced in American dollars or US dollars. And I think this whole shattered mess starts to play itself out if they continue to let things happen the way that they're letting them happen. And that is when you take away the free market system, when you take away the ability to have a true price discovery model, when you force everybody into one asset class, how good can that be? Can you picture it now? You've taken away the free market system. You've systematically forced every investor to go into the stock market. Why? Because that is somehow the gauge or the mentality that we all think of. Well, if the market's doing well, then everything is doing well. What we don't look at is what is wrong and what is not doing well. And what is not doing well are jobs stink. What are not doing well is wages stink. What is not doing well is we can't afford health insurance. So there's so many things that we continue to ignore that eventually they have to come back. Things just don't disappear on their own. Things just don't just say, okay, it's over. All right, now you look at retail. Retail sales were down once again. All right, now again, we call it maybe the retail ice age, maybe not, but that goes back to the theory that, who wants to go to a retail store? I don't have to. And of course, Amazon sent shockwaves through the pharmacy industry last week, Walgreens, CVS, and the likes, because they're thinking about getting into the pharmacy business. Can you imagine? And I think this is a concern. Now, again, I'm not going to say that the government needs to step in. I mean, the government should step away completely, all right? That's my opinion. But the ability that what's been created here now, you've got Walmart and Amazon out. And I'm going to say that if things continue as they are, a couple of years from now, there will only be Walmart and Amazon. And what's going to happen is they could potentially collude on price fixing. Now, I know that's far-fetched to think about, but it's something that could be actually very real. And Archer Daniels Midland tried it in the 90s with some vitamins, especially lysine, which really hurt farmers. All right. Again, these are issues that nobody talks about, but are real issues. They're real concerns. Again, if I systematically wipe out all my competition, then I'm free to price. If you remember, I can't remember the name of the company, but the company with the peanut butter allergy, the EpiPen, all right? Do you realize that they systematically put everybody out of business, all right? And of course, they were charging $1 zillion for that thing. And of course, they went through some troubles, but in the meantime, still nobody else is making it. There was other competition, but when you destroy and you wipe out competition, you are free to charge as you wish. It's like what was tried with Standard Oil, okay, and the Rockefellers. We don't think about these things. We let them go and we destroy. And the only reason that Amazon has been able to do what Amazon's been able to do is basically because of the Fed, because of their lack of ability and understanding on how we let these things grow. But these are very, very serious issues that are truly a part of what can happen. Now, again, I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just concerned that it can happen. I'm worried about the future. I'm worried about all the pensions collapsing. I'm worried about all the people right now, all the fixed income people that have every one of their dimes in the stock market because there's nowhere else to go. That to me becomes a problem. That was the destruction of the free market system because you don't have free products out there to trade. Tie that into with companies that now are contracting to get their earnings to be terrific, which is great for the stockholders and great for the CEOs, but it's not good for the average Main Street. And that, again, is another issue. Are we going to continue to ignore Main Street? Are we looking for another revolution in this country? And that, I think, is the direction you're headed. You're kind of seeing it start to play out in the Democratic and the Republican Party. It's kind of like a little bit of a revolution. Now, I'm not saying there's going to be one. I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but this is how it starts. It starts very innocently. And look at the hatred you have. Look at the state senator from Missouri again, forget her name, I should forget her name, who ran the new Adolf Hitler and Donald Trump, all right, where he, that commercial that had all that problems with the person, and I don't remember if she was white or if she was black, but she took off her top and she turned to the other color, and now she shows this thing with Donald Trump, I think on Facebook, that Donald Trump pulls off his clothes, he becomes Adolf Hitler. I think that is tragic that this is the way that state senators can act, and I think this is tragic that we spend so much time trying to bash the president versus trying to make America great. But these are all warning signs that are showing you that there's something much bigger coming on down the road. I think this is something that, again, becomes a much greater issue when you think about it, because you're creating so much hatred and so much pain and so many things that are driving the two parties away. I mean, think about it. Could it be a civil war between the Democrats and the Republicans? I mean, when you think about things, I mean, again, we don't think about it because it hasn't happened, but there certainly is a tremendous amount of feeling on opposite. And I think these are things that can create these major problems as well. So there's so many things that you look at that I think could be created. And of course, we get back into the inflation thing and what the Fed is trying to do. And there's so many other things out there, but it's amazing how we can hone in on a few things that are really having this major effect on people, on markets, on money, and where do we go from here? And I think that becomes the bigger problem, okay? I think that becomes the bigger issue. But we're gonna step out of here for a break. This is Bubba's Bottom Line, Todd Bubba Horwitz. Again, just a reminder, we're now starting to use Patreon to help raise some money for the high school students. We want to continue to expand, but I need to get a little bit of help now, and since I have no sponsors, I'm looking to get help for providing content to everybody, but you can check it out at Patreon. That's patreon.com/Bubba Trading, patreon.com/Bubba Trading. In the meantime, don't forget to check out The Bubba Show every day from 2 to 3 Eastern at libertytalk.fm. We're going to step out here for a break, and we will be right back with my commentary after the break. Bubba's Bottom Line. Welcome back to Bubba's Bottom Line. Todd Bubba Horwitz with you. And of course, what would a week be without me bitching about something, right? All right. So last week, we had the Federal Reserve. They put out their minutes on Wednesday. And of course, it was the typical, impossible to decipher verbiage that nobody could ever understand. All right. And, again, I've called them before. I'm not afraid to call them again. They're two-faced. You don't know what they're saying. It's almost impossible to interpret what they're trying to do. Now, the first thing is that they're totally clueless as to what the real world and the real life is about. Because none of them have ever, I think, gotten their hands dirty or had to fix something or whatever. Now, we all know that life works on common sense, not on books. You can get the instruction manual, but a lot of times things don't go to the manual. So now with their ridiculous inflation target again, all right, now you know what's going to happen right here. We've seen this movie before. This is not the first time. We're going to go from no inflation to hyperinflation, and the whole world's going to fall apart. Now, the real problem is that their willingness to destruct the free market system. And if you think about this, all right, what is truly a free, what is left other than a flea market? What is left is a free market, all right? Now, this is all a way of building more of a nationalism system or a socialist system, because eventually, if they don't let the markets price the asset classes by themselves, if they don't let the markets go through the true free market and price discovery model, if they don't let companies fail that should fail and stand away and let the markets determine who should be and who should not be, you're going to end up with some kind of major financial collapse. This is not brain science surgery, right? They are walking around like the Walking Dead, all right, that have no idea of what to do next. And they continue to harp on this inflation. But you have to remember one thing. It's kind of hard to get any true inflation when a big majority of your population is not working. And the ones that are working are not making any money. All right? It's hard to inflate prices when the supply-demand curve is not in your favor. We don't have a huge demand because most people, a big percentage of the middle class, is only buying their absolute necessities because they can't afford to buy anything else. And this is created by the Fed. This is made. Now, look, we always understand, and I've said this many, many times, the rich should get richer because they do step in to situations. However, in this particular case, they have isolated and made sure that the rich got richer, and they made sure that the middle class did not. Now, yes, maybe your 401k is in better shape, and no problem. But you think that that's going to? Did you cash it? Until you take the money out, you haven't realized the gain or the loss, right? So right now you're on air, and believe me, there is no issue that at some point, in whatever time frame, I can't give you the time, these markets will have another major correction, taking you and putting you to a decision for all of your money. And what are you going to do when your IRA or your 401k or whatever it goes from 500,000 to 200,000? That's going to happen, okay? It's not, again, I'm not gloom and dooming it. I'm not a perma bear. I'm just saying that that's part of the natural markets, right? And when you forced the hand of everybody, which this is what the Federal Reserve has done, into one asset class, you cannot continue to bail it out forever. Now, we've got major problems in this country that have to be resolved, and the way that we're going about them, they will never get resolved. This becomes another one of the major issues that is being totally ignored by the Fed and by what's going on, and of course the Fed, the ECB, and all the other central banks around the world, because they don't care. That's the real point. They don't care. They care about taking care of the banks and making them rich on our time and our money. Think about it for a minute. If you go back to 2008, why did we bail out the banks? Why didn't we just give the money to the depositors? Why did the banks have to bail out? The banks are too big. If we continue at this current pace, which has been created again by the Fed, and you continue to get these big banks, and you're now going to have big Amazon, big Walmart, and nobody else, what do you think is going to be left for us? We'll be like living in a camp. This is not the way to grow the economy. This is not the way to make things better. And having a group that only understands how to read directions out of a book on theory, a group that can't recognize a bubble when they're creating it, a group that can't recognize what the financial system is supposed to do, a group that doesn't understand price discovery and free markets is not the group that you want determining your future. And that's what the Federal Reserve is. They are a worthless organization that was created, in my opinion, to take away and allow a select few to accumulate the dollars. Think about it. No big deal. I wasn't always like this, but it certainly seems like it now. Anyways, that'll do it for this week. Thank you so much for being here. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and share some ideas with you and what's going on. In the meantime, look for the markets to continue the same pattern for now. I don't see any reason that will change. You'll probably continue to see this slow drift, no volatility, and until that changes, it'll be what it'll be. But there'll be something at some point. Nobody knows when, but there will be something. Have a great weekend, everybody. Have a great day. I appreciate you. Go Cubbies. Bubba's Bottom Line. Don't forget, Bubba's Show, 2 to 3 Eastern, every day at libertytalk.fm. Have a great week, everybody. This is Bubba signing off. We'll see you next time. Thanks.